Hello and welcome to Resource Review. Today we're evaluating 3 resources for secondary modern foreign languages. A set of photocopyable lesson starters and texts.
1, 2, 3, montrez les tableaux. Excellent. Tony Blair, Margaret Thatcher, Charles Kennedy.
An interactive website.
Meldet ein bitte. Log on, please.
And some assessment materials. Find out what our panel of experts think here on Resource Review. Joining me to recommend today's resources is Kate Townsend. Kate is a former secondary school head of MFL and is now Secondary Strategy Manager and Learning and Teaching Advisor for Stoke-on-Trent Local Authority. Joining Kate is Judy Hawker. Judy is MFL teacher at Patcham House School and lead professional in Brighton and Hove. And we also have Adam Cook, MFL advisor for Norfolk Local Authority. So thank you all very much for coming. It's great to have you on the show. Kate, let's begin with your first choice of resource, and it's these 2 photocopyable booklets by Martine Pilette, both for French, Textes à Gogo and Zappy Lesson Starters. Tell us about these resources, Kate, and why you like them.
These resources key very much into the framework. What I like about the approach is that I think it really gets inside what learners need. And quite often you're looking at something and thinking, why didn't I identify the fact that kids find that difficult? And there's a lot of support for learners in it. There's also a lot of support for teachers. Although it says Key Stage 3 on it, you know, you'd be crazy not to use them at Key Stage 4 and even Key Stage 5 because all of the patterns for those starters are really sensible.
OK, well, before we go into this resource any further, let's have a look at it in action. And we visited Bradley Stoke Community School in Bristol to see teacher Séverine Brinster and her Year 7 French class.
Ça va? Excellent, très bien, OK. The resource is basically, it's a booklet. So it's a Zappy Lesson Starters booklet, which contains about 40 pages. And the last resource is called Textes à Gogo, which is just a series of text, and that is all based on Key Stage 3 resources, basically. Écoutez, mentionnez un animal. In the Zappy Lesson Starter, I decided to use an exercise where I'm going to ask them questions in French and I have to answer. So it's understanding what I'm saying to them and providing me with an answer. Mentionnez un politicien. 1, 2, 3, montrez les tableaux. Excellent. Tony Blair, Margaret Thatcher, Charles Kennedy. Basically, the reading I gave them today, this was extracted from the Textes à Gogo booklet. OK, just by reading the title, can you start telling me what it is about? When we started, there was a lot of thumb down, like, oh, I find it difficult. And by halfway through the lesson, when we went through the techniques of Martine Pilette and using the text, I had a lot of thumb up saying, oh, I actually find the text easy and accessible. So I thought that was really good. I really like this resource and I really like to use it in different situations because basically you can do an exercise and you can just modify it to the level of your students. So it's really practical for your differentiation in the classroom. Martine Pilette gives you some ideas how to exploit it, but it's very flexible and then you can do whatever you want with it. Maybe the Textes à Gogo, it would be nice maybe to have maybe other sorts of texts in there. Otherwise, I really think it's good and I will definitely use it all the way through all the Key Stage 3. I think you can even use it at Key Stage 4 and adapt it. It depends what sort of question you ask and you can differentiate very easily as well.
Kate, the teachers seem to like this resource. But I have to say, these resources to me look very, very basic. I mean, they're not the most inspiring resources. What would you say to that?
Well, you could have extremely flashy resources that teachers did precious little with that wouldn't have the impact of those resources. They're very intelligently designed. They make very, very good use of topics that are really going to appeal to children. And they're also going to be a resource that departments can work on to develop their own teaching style. And she does what teachers often ask you, well, what words will I use if I'm using target language to do this activity in the classroom? It's all there in that resource.
OK.
And it's cheap. Cheap and cheerful.
Well, that's going to make it popular. Adam, are you a fan of Martine Pellet's resources?
I'm a massive fan of Martine Pellet's resources, and I think her strategies transform the way that I've taught teaching, breaking things down into really simple little steps so that they, quite lower attainers can access quite sophisticated texts. I think it's brilliant. I think it gets kids thinking, it raises their self-esteem because they're doing something really difficult but in a very simple, structured way.
So, Judy, are you a fan as well?
Oh yes, definitely. I most certainly will use them in my classroom now. And I just think the fact that they are so unpretentious means that you'll sit down and actually read what's in there and take up the ideas and really adapt them for yourself.
OK, well, thank you. Now let's move on to Kate's second choice of resource, and that's the Linguascope website. Tell us, what does this website entail and why do you like it?
Well, I chose this website because a teacher told me that she absolutely swore by it. In essence, it's got some fairly straightforward games, which are of the sort of noughts and crosses, drag and drop, hangman. There's teacher support in terms of pedagogy, but also in terms of techie support.
OK, well, thank you very much. Before we discuss Linguascope any further, let's see it in use in the classroom. And we visited William Ellis School in London, where teacher Carl Altman's Year 7 class are learning German.
Meldet ein, bitte. Log on, please.
Linguascope is a resource that many of the exercises are to do with vocabulary recognition. So it is not so much a resource that builds up sentence structure in language, it's something that just is giving boys the groundings for vocabulary learning. It gives, as I say, various different exercises with the vocabulary learning, and it just builds up their confidence in vocabulary.
Because there's not supposed to be a space.
It introduces vocabulary in a very fun way. They're able to do so many different exercises. They also are able to listen to the words, so they can click on an image, they can see the word and they can hear it being said. Now this is obviously invaluable because they're seeing the word spelt and they're hearing it at the same time and also seeing an image of it. The students respond really well to Linguascope. They enjoy the variation in games, they enjoy learning the language, obviously. They especially enjoy when they use the headsets and they can hear the words as well.
Das Museum. Die Bank.
There are certain exercises that they like more than others. For instance, they like the Tetris game, where a word will come down in German or in French. The boys will see it and then they'll have to type the translation of that word in English as quickly as possible. And this works on a point basis. There are ways that the website could be improved in terms of the fact that at the moment it really is very heavily vocabulary based. And I think Linguascope could look towards doing more exercises with sentence structure, so incorporating vocabulary within a sentence. So the fact that it is simply vocabulary based at the moment certainly could be expanded.
Well, Kate, another very good review from the teacher there, but he certainly thought there was some scope, and excuse the pun, for development of Linguascope. What would you say to that?
I think he'd focused perhaps a lot on the German part, and that certainly does need development. The French site is much more developed, so that on the French site there are some really terrific links to television programmes, for example, that's going to make that a really exciting resource for people teaching sixth formers. OK, well now let's see what our panel think. Judy, what were your thoughts on Linguascope?
I would see it as quite a good resource for quick fire, say a starter in a language lesson, just revising vocabulary. But I am very concerned about the fact that the vocabulary is not linked to sentence structure or anything to do with text.
Adam, let's bring you in. What do you think of it?
I think it's slightly outdated in its topic-based approach to language acquisition, seeing animals there and food and drinks. I would like to see some more framework, MFL framework-based exercises, so developing pupils' language awareness, which I think would be, would increase their thinking and be much more beneficial really than this topic-based approach, seeing language as being pigeonholed into certain areas.
Well, Judy's nodding there as well. Kate, just a final comment.
I think it's probably difficult to set up a website and to know what your starting points are, but I think they've started and I hope they'll move on from that. But I take your point, and particularly the English part of it. I did wonder how EAL users would benefit from the English part of it, and I wondered whether it was culturally rather narrow in its parameters.
Well, thank you very much. Some interesting discussion there. Now let's move on to Kate's third choice of resource, something a little bit different. These are some assessment materials available from the DFES. So Kate, we've got a few of them printed out here. Tell us, what is this resource and why, again, have you chosen it?
I've chosen it because most schools in the country now, most secondary schools and indeed primary schools, are working on assessment for learning as a key lever to improve pupils' performance. If you look at them, they look very dull.
Yes.
So again, a lot of this is about digging down what's actually beneath it. The one I picked out in particular was the one on peer and self-assessment, which I think has got a lot to offer modern language teachers. Again, it sort of fits in, if you like, with the methodology that Martine Pilette is offering, getting children to be more critical and more self-aware about the way in which they approach their work.
Right. OK, what do our panel think? I mean, are you in favour of this kind of thing? What did you think of this resource, Judy?
I think that it has a very good place for encouraging departments as a whole to focus in on certain aspects of assessment for learning and to really try and develop them. So long as the whole lesson or the whole module doesn't just focus on assessment for learning, it should be part and parcel of the whole of what is going on within teaching of the modern foreign language.
OK. Adam?
It is, dare I say, it's classically DFES. It looks quite dull on the outside, and yet there's some real gems inside there. And I actually have written training based upon these materials, cherry-picked a bit, but taken the major themes that people need to be focusing upon. It just involves kids so much in looking at what they're supposed to be learning, how they're learning it, and how they're now going to assess whether or not they've learnt it. So, yeah, it's brilliant.
OK, well, Kate, well done. Another very popular resource there. I'm afraid that's all we've got time for today. But to recap, the three resources that we looked at for secondary MFL were Zappy Lesson Starters and Textagogo from Martine Pilette, Linguascope interactive website from Linguascope, and Assessment for Learning materials for modern foreign languages from the DFES. For more information about any of the resources that we've discussed today, or to post your own comments about other resources for secondary MFL, go to our website. It's teachers.tv/resource review. Or if you want to, email us, resourcereview@teachers.tv. So all that remains for me to do is to say a very big thank you to our panel, to Kate, to Judy and to Adam. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Resource Review. Bye-bye.